All right, Michael, we've gone through the first 6 picks, and like we mentioned, no cornerbacks off the board. The Giants have been linked to corner Wink Martindale, now the defensive coordinator there. His defenses tend to be driven by those big cornerbacks. Is this a spot here we could see a Sauce Gardner go to the Meadowlands, or maybe they go somewhere else?
Oh, I think you could. I mean, look, they want to get rid of Bradbury. They need to clear up some cap room, so it gives them an opportunity to do that. I think if they go offense in the first pick, you got to believe they'll go defense with the second. Or, maybe they just feel like if there's an offensive lineman, they feel like, why not, fix one area of your team. The one thing I think if you're Joe Shine, you're not going to fix everything in 1 year. Like, you're just not going to do it. Like, you're so bad that you've taken over this team. The reason you have this job is because over the last 5 years, you've not won more than 6 games. So the reason you're here is because your team stinks. And so if you took 2 offensive linemen, if you took 2 defensive linemen, if you took 2 defensive players or 1 in each, you would strengthen your team. You got to get 2 starters. And I'm not saying you're going to get elite starters. Gardner could be an elite corner. And knowing the way Wink wants to play man-to-man, it certainly gives you length and athleticism out on the outside. It would make perfect sense to me.
Maybe receiver. I know there's been rumblings that they could be trading Kadarius Toney, who they took in the first round last year. Maybe receiver at 7 to double up on offense if they go tackle at 5.
I mean, unless they can get the defensive line to count to 5 Mississippi, how are they going to get the ball to him? Like, seriously, and then they can't rush the passer, Yeah. Like, unless they can get the offense to agree, they only have to count to 3 Mississippi. Like, seriously, at some point, you got to all these teams want to draft receiver. All these mocks want to go receiver. But at the end of the day, you got to be able to win in the trenches. I know last year that Cincinnati was horrible in the trenches. I get that. But they had Joe Burrow. You got Daniel Jones. You better protect him.
Yeah, and as fast, I was reading Peter King's mock draft this morning. He had 6 wide receivers in the first 18 picks. Like, that is, I know there's going to be a lot that go early, but 6 in first 18, that's saying something there.
Here's what I would say to you about that. And I'm not saying Peter's wrong. Here's what I would say to you is there's going to be somebody picked in the 2nd or 3rd round that is going to be better than the first rounders. Yeah. It's a guarantee. It's a guarantee. And we've seen it. Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf.
Yep.
We've
A.J.
seen these
Brown.
guys. McLaurin, A.J. Brown, better than N'Keal Harry picked in the first round, better than other guys picked in the first round. And so like all these teams that are getting receivers, there's the value is that you can move it. They're replaceable. What I think we make a real big mistake with in the NFL is in terms of evaluating receivers is they are very few number 1 receivers. They're very few number 1 guys. The guy you can line up on the outside and say, okay, here you go. You can win out there. You're going to win against everybody you play against. It's no problem. Like Treylon Burks from Arkansas. Like, he's more of an inside big receiver. Can he win on the outside? I know he runs fast in a 40, but can he win on the outside? You got to ask yourself, if you're drafting one in the first round, don't you want him to be a number 1 guy? A guy that can tilt the field in your favor? And to me, I think a lot of these guys are just, they're 2s. They're not 1s. And there's more of them out there than every position. So to waste it, there's nobody else, unless you see him as a 1. But I think what we'll see here, more than anything, what we'll see is some player, you mark my words, some player picked in the 2nd or 3rd round, maybe even the 5th round, that'll be as good as somebody picked in the 1st.
No, I agree with you on that philosophy about wide receivers, especially with the new rules in today's game. Like, a lot of these guys can be productive just because you can't touch them on the outside. So it's a position that I don't think I would take in the top 10 unless I saw the next Julio Jones or the next Devontae Adams, which maybe some of these teams see them in this crop of receivers. But for game's sake, let's go Sauce Gardner at 7 to the New York Giants. We'll see Wink Martindale gets his cornerback to build around on that defense. The Atlanta Falcons at 8, I feel like this is a team that can go just rank all the players, take the best one on the board because they have holes everywhere.
Yeah, and they have the biggest holes in the defensive front. I mean, Dean Pease is sitting there playing with nobody up front. Like, he's got Grady
Jarrett. Yeah.
Grady I was going to call him Grady Jackson, who was a hell of a player. Who would have just kept his weight off. But, I mean, other than that, Grady Jarrett, who else do they have in the front? Like, at some point, you got to get better up front. And then all the times that they've spent on offensive line in the draft in prior years, their offensive line hasn't been very good. I know they re-signed Mathis to a contract, but, I mean, their offense, they lose games. And the reason their quarterback has gotten hit so many times is because, well, you say he doesn't move around very well. Well, he can move it, get out of the way. The problem is everybody is in the way. Like, at some point, you got to protect the quarterback. And they got Hennessy's a third. They got Lindstrom's a first. They got McCrary's a first. And they got Mayfield a third, but they're not blocking anybody. I think they could go offensive, defensive line. But to me, defensive line is the one position they got to fix. They have to really fix that. And if they can find a guy here, to me, I don't know who would the player they would like the most. But to draft a receiver, I mean, I know they need one badly, but they just drafted one last year, and his name's Kyle Pitts. They call him a tight end, but nobody calls him a tight end on the games on Sunday. They call him a big wide receiver.
Yeah. No, I can't see going pass catcher back-to-back top tens. Seems like a far-fetched situation there for me there. Let's go wild card. Let's give them Florida State's Jermaine Johnson on the defensive line. Let's go that. Jermaine Johnson goes at 8, and everybody acts surprised on draft night, saying, oh my goodness, how did they pick him that high? The Seattle Seahawks at pick 9. John Schneider comes from the school of trade down at all costs and ask questions later. Is that the situation we find ourselves here at 9, or the Seahawks wow us again with another wild card pick?
Well, I think the one thing you know about John Schneider is he don't really give a shit about the mocks. He's going to pick who he thinks is the best player, right? And my hat's off to him for that. Yeah. Like, I don't think he really gives a shit. I don't think he gives a shit about Mel's board, Todd's board, NFL Network's board. I don't think he gives a crap. I think he sees the players. He's going to grade them. I'm all for that. And so would he like to move down? I'm sure he probably would. But he knows he's got to repair his offensive line. He knows he's got to repair his defensive front. They're not the same talent level team that they've been in the past. So, I think this could go in any direction. It could go to linebacker. You lose Bobby Wagner at middle linebacker. Are you sure Cody Barton's going to be the guy to come in and replace him? Or are you going to put Brooks over there or make him the will? I think this could go in any direction. I think you could make a case for anybody, and I think you could make the strongest case for moving down. I mean, look, he could take the next best offensive lineman, too.
Yeah.
Like, none of those positions. I think where he's sitting right there at 9, he's waiting for somebody to fall in his lap. And if nobody falls in his lap, then he makes the move.
How about we go here, another shocker. Trevor Penning, the Northern Iowa offensive tackle.
I don't think that's a shocker at all. I think he's a really good player. And I think he's moving up the board not only because he's a good player and supply and demand. Supply and demand. If we don't get this guy, where's the next tackle coming from?
And he plays with a mean streak, and he can fit right into that Seattle Seahawks culture there. And Penning is seen as almost one of these off the board, off the grid kind of guys to the draft nicks and to the draft media folks. So I could see the Seahawks shocking the world there in terms of the media and taking Trevor Penning at Northern Iowa. Number 10, the New York Jets back on the clock here. At 4, we give him Kayvon Thibodeau there. So Saleh gets his edge rusher. What do they do here at 10?
Well, look, the Jets can go in any direction, right? To me, once again, I think they can. They're all about team speed on defense. And knowing Douglas, he's going to take a guy who's big school, that can run, his size, speed player. That's the Baltimore way of doing it. And I think whatever one leaves off, I could see them taking Penning, an offensive lineman here as well. I think they could easily take an offensive lineman just to keep improving that offensive line, keep building their team that way. I know they signed Tomlinson, and last year they drafted Vera Tucker. So, I think ultimately, could they take a right tackle? Sure. I mean, can you win with George Fant playing right tackle? I mean, maybe they move Becton over. I think offensive line's in play. I mean, they drafted a receiver in the 2nd round last year. They signed a lot of money to Corey Davis. They don't love Denzel Mims. Do I think they could take that? Maybe. But I think it could be the corner. Or it really could be, which I don't think they would, based on the way they've invested in corners in Seattle and San Francisco. But I could see it being some front 7 player. I think that's what it would be.
See, a front 7 player there for the New York Jets. Maybe a receiver. Can I convince you wide receiver? I know what we've said about these guys, but everything that they've done throughout this offseason has been them trying to trade for a big play veteran wide receiver. Do they maybe settle for one at 10 in the draft?
Well, I mean, look, I think a lot of that, the receiver board to me is complicated because I don't really know where, Jamison Williams is on the board in terms of where is he medically? Like, where is he? Does he fit medically? I think that's the biggest concern. And if he can clear himself medically, then, he certainly has a potential to be a number 1 outside receiver. Could they take Garrett Wilson, who I think is the best receiver in this draft class? Maybe the value would be too good at that point. I think when you look at these draft boards, and as I wrote about in the column, is there's, Al Davis used to tell Mickey Marvin, go to the board, 1A, 1B, 1C. Well, there's very few players in 1A and probably even fewer in 1B. So where would that player come from? Is it going to be the corner market? Would it be Stingley? Would it be McDuffie? Maybe. Would it be the linebacker? Is it Dean or is it Devin Lloyd? I think I think that's what Joe Douglas is looking at, and then you've got to compare it. Now, this to me, with Douglas's pick here, the horizontal board comes in play. Is Wilson graded a 1A player, and you're getting them at 10? You better take them.
Yeah, because I think you had him as that 1A, 1B, almost kind of hanging out in between in the draft betting guide that you wrote for VSiN there. Williams, I don't know if you caught this over the weekend. His agent went out and put the video out of him working out yesterday, almost trying to put the PR machine out there saying, hey, my guy's ahead of schedule with the rehab, so maybe some teams will catch wind of that and liken to Jamison Williams there as a first wide receiver off the board. But let's go front seven / Garrett Wilson there. The Jets are a mystery, so we'll see what happens at 10. Washington at 11. What do you think? Like, Hamilton's a guy that they've been linked to. Olave, Wilson,
I think it's a receiver.
You think
I think it's a receiver. Yeah, okay. I think they need to get some weapons. I think they could certainly take Hamilton. I think this could be the place where we'll hear, we didn't think he would make it to us, so we take him. I think that could be the case.
Yeah, and then they get to thump their chest and say we had him number 4 on our draft board there, and he picked him at 11.
I don't get the sense that any of these teams are really debating about taking a quarterback at this.
And that's the thing. Like, we've gone through all of this, and you have not said quarterback whatsoever for any of these teams, some of which have been linked to quarterbacks. They've done homework on these quarterbacks. I know Peter King talked about in his mock draft, he didn't have a quarterback going in the first 19 picks. Pittsburgh at 20 taking Kenny Pickett there. The quarterbacks, you think we go through the top 10 picks and they're still on the board?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt. They're not worthy of the pick. I've been saying it all year, no matter how much they put them in the mock. They're just not worth it. You can't force something that's not there. You say, well, they have a need. Well, once you pick them, you still have the need because they're not going to be good enough to play. I mean, there's too many concerns. There's too many variables that you can't control. Pickett's got ability to be could he start 5? Yeah. Could he be a 17-game starter? I have a hard time seeing that. Could Malik Willis do it? Guy didn't throw a touchdown pass against a Group 5 Power 5 team. He left Auburn. There's a whole bunch of debate. Why Cam Newton left Florida, went to Auburn. Like, why didn't he stay within the Southeast Conference? I don't know. I don't know the answer to those questions, but if I was in the league, I'd be trying to find them out.
Vikings.
Matt Corral's the other one. I mean, Matt Corral is a guy that's got, certainly he's got ability, but could he stay healthy? Who knows?
Yeah, the Corral has that small frame there at the quarterback position, and availability is the biggest ability at quarterback because if you're on the bench, you're not really helping out the team there. The Vikings at 12, the Texans at 13. Do you think this is maybe where we see another cornerback go with a Derek Stingley, who's been kicked around the league, likes him more than some of the draft media?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt. I think you'll start to see it. Look, I think this is going to be a defensive draft. I really do. I think that, this is now we're at the point in the draft where almost all the what you pick at 15, you might get at 35. You might get at 40. Not to the media you won't, but to those guys in the draft room, there's going to be a lot of value in terms of the meat of this draft. It's a second-round draft, essentially. Mm-hmm. And the key for this draft to be successful for any team is to not pick a guy that is similar to a guy you pick in the 3rd round. That's the key. That's the hard part. And don't say, well, we got to trade down, because I think in this draft, it's going to be harder and harder to trade down.
And that's what, because you just answered my question right there. I was like, how many trades do you think we end up seeing in the first 15 to 20 picks? Because everyone wants to do it, but that tells me that it's a seller's market with not a whole lot of buyers.
That's right. I think because everybody sees the board as an opportunity to get the same player, why would I give up an asset to get it? As long as I'm not married to the position, I'm going to get a player similar to what I need. If you get desperate, the people that trade up in this draft will be the lovers. And I wrote about this 2 weeks ago. Teams that fall in love with a player. Lovers will always trade up regardless of the draft. It's quality.
Thanks for watching the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi. And for more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to VSiN Live and the GM Shuffle podcast with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN, wherever you get your podcasts.